All right. Social studies, notebooks out. And you're going to want to open up the Lesson 2, Chapter 8 PDF posted there in Schoology. We're going to take some notes today on Lesson 2. You are going to want to label your first blank page you come up to, though, Chapter 8, Lesson 2, Vocab, People, Places. Leave that page blank, or maybe a page or two. And then on the next page, we're going to start notes, and then we'll finish notes tomorrow. So Chapter 8, Lesson 2 notes. And we're going to start our notes down here. I know, that's why you need to leave probably a page or maybe even 2 pages blank. And then we're on page 302 on your PDF is where Lesson 2 starts. So we did a lot with the French and Indian War, right? That was a war over what land? War over what land, Maya? Right, the Ohio River Valley. Who was fighting over it? The main 2 countries. Claire? Right, Britain and France were fighting over it. It's called the French and Indian War because the Native Americans are helping France, okay, try and battle against Britain. But Britain ends up gaining the most land out of that war. Okay, and what happens because Britain decided to do this war? What happens? Riker?
Sugar Act?
Yeah, they're taxed, right? Who does Britain tax? They instilled the Sugar Act was the first one. Nick?
France?
Not France. Brendan?
Oh, the colonies?
Yeah, the colonists that are living over here in North America in these colonies. So Britain decides to tax them, with the first one being the Sugar Act. What are they hoping to gain with these taxes? What was the point of them? Josh?
Trying to gain money.
Right, they needed money. What did they need money for, Claire?
To heal up the damage.
Right, they had to pay for that war, right? They had to pay for maybe damages or just whatever resources they were using, supplies, debts they had to pay off. So Britain taxed the colonists because they needed money to pay for this French and Indian War that had taken place on the colonists' land. Okay, so we're going to read some more here. Lesson 2 says colonists speak out. So they weren't very happy about the Sugar Act, were they?
No.
Okay, and they kind of let them know. And we're going to read more here in this Lesson 2. We're building up to that American Revolutionary War. That's what's happening right now. French and Indian War is done. Britain is starts to tax the colonists, and it continues to get worse. Okay, so we are on page 302. Question, Riker?
If they're taxing the colonists for money, and then they're doing the war on their land, then why doesn't the colonists just pay for it if it's going to be on their
Did the
land?
colonists want to have that war? Who wanted that war?
No, I'm saying, like, if it's going to be on their land, they want to repair their land.
They do, but it may not necessarily be damage. It might have just been they were paying for supplies, right? They were paying for maybe the soldiers to be in that war. Okay, so it may not have anything to do with the land and what happened at or near the land. It's just we need money to pay the supplies and pay off the debt that was created because of this war. Right. Okay, the different weapons that they were using and that kind of stuff. Nick, question?
Wait, so you said how it's like building up to a Revolution War. Does that mean like the little wars and keep like triggering stuff to make the Revolution War?
Well, what happens is Britain, the king continues to upset the colonists, and it just kind of comes to this end game, which ends up being the Revolutionary War, where they decide, you know what, we're going to separate from them, and this is what we want to do, and Britain says, no, you can't. And we'll read, as we continue through this, you'll kind of see what happens, okay, and how we get to that point. All right? So you are there. A hush falls over the British Parliament. Benjamin Franklin is about to speak out against Britain's tax law. The year is 1766, and you have traveled to London with Franklin. Do you think it right that the colonists should be protected by Britain and pay no part of the cost? Asks one member of Parliament. That is not the case, Franklin says. The colonists raised cloth and paid during the last year, near 25,000 men and spent many millions. Surely you think Parliament must take back the law. So we're seeing what's happening, right? Franklin's there trying to reason with them. 303, your first Roman numeral is going to be the Stamp Act. So we had the Sugar Act, now we have the Stamp Act. I know, it's been a long time, hasn't it? You may also want to get out this paper, okay, which has, we did the French and Indian War, we did the Sugar Act, and now the Stamp Act is there. We'll fill that in, or start to. It'll be a helpful page. Quick resource is what that is on the major points that are happening.
Are we gonna fill this in too?
Yeah. All right. In 1765, Parliament approved another tax law. The Stamp Act put a tax on many paper items in the colonies. Newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards had to have a special stamp on them to show that the tax had been paid. What's the Stamp Act? What is it?
That's desperate for money.
They were. Kenny, what is it?
It's where you have to like pay to send something. Or have
Possibly, that was
paper,
part of it.
or to have paper.
Anything that was paper. So the Stamp Act taxed paper items, right?
So
Including, they said playing cards, maybe tax or legal documents, newspapers. So all of those were taxed. Anything paper related. See? Right. Oh, get it. My God's dumping water all over the floor. Too late, now it's done. Right, 303, I'm reading underneath, no taxation without representation. What do you think that means? That becomes a pretty good slogan for our colonists. No taxation without representation. What is representation? We talked about a representative government. Sean? Okay, so when we're talking about a representative government, what are we talking about? John? Exactly. Nobody was acting for them, right? Nobody in the British Parliament or over in the government for where Britain and England were at. Okay, like kind of the same places there, just different names. There was nobody representing the colonists and their thoughts and their ideas. Okay, it was all just those that were living over there. So they were being taxed and they weren't getting a say. And that's what this paragraph is about. Or paragraphs. It says British leaders felt the tax was fair. Many colonists, however, were angry. They said Britain could not tax them because they had no representation in Parliament. No one was speaking or acting for them. Mercy Otis Warren, a Massachusetts writer, disagreed with the new tax. She began writing plays that accused British leaders of being greedy. In Virginia, Patrick Henry told other members of the House of Burgesses that Parliament did not represent the colonies. Those who supported Parliament's actions shouted, "Treason, treason." By accusing Henry of treason, they were saying he was guilty of working against his own government. On October 1765, representatives from 9 colonies met in New York City in what became known as the Stamp Act Congress. A Congress is a formal meeting of Representatives. There, colonial leaders speak out against the Stamp Act. Soon, people began to repeat the words, "No taxation without representation." So, the colonists were saying what? What could Britain not do to them? Kenny?
They couldn't tax them if they didn't have their representative.
Right. Colonists believe that Britain shouldn't tax them if they had no, it's gonna be a long one, representation in government. Or you might say, in this case, it was Parliament, which is their form of government. Okay? So the no representation in the government was a big part of why the colonists were fighting against these taxes.
You put not representation.
They had no. Surprised it didn't underline it. Minutes, write that down.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't underline it because not is a word.
It is, but it'll underline grammatical errors too. Unless I have them turned off, which that could be.
I think I could still write the Cronenberg's book at 10 years old. I need to teach the younglings about the worst
About
year.
the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, 2020 is the worst year that ever happened.
Right here, you also need to.
At least there were some parts dancing robots. And I was building.
All right, that's my cue. We're ready to move on. Roman numeral 2. Whoops. There's an awful lot of conversations happening. On page 304, colonists work together. Will be our next one here.
Wait, for like some of them, if we can, so we can understand it still, are we allowed to like just abbreviate it a little bit?
As long as you know. Mm-hmm.
It's our notes, not hers.
She, Kenny?
Can we just put like 1 and 2 instead of Roman numerals?
Yeah, that's fine.
Roman numeral.
All right, colonists work together. I'm on page 304. Many colonists tried to force Britain to take back the Stamp Act. Some wrote letters to Parliament, some chose not to buy taxed goods. Others began to boycott or refuse to buy all British goods. The Sons and Daughters of Liberty. Soon after the Stamp Act was passed, a group of colonists called the Sons of Liberty began to work against it. To most colonists, liberty meant freedom to make their own laws. The Sons of Liberty captured several British workers who tried to collect the tax. They covered these tax collectors with sticky tar and dumped feathers on them. The Sons of Liberty also chased tax collectors out of their towns. So who were the Sons of Liberty? Who were they and what did they do? Hunter?
They're like kind of like police and catch people.
They weren't police. I mean, they were catching people. Who were they catching?
I said they were like acting like people, like police who were trying to catch people who are trying to pay tax.
They were capturing people who were doing what? They were doing what for the British government, Sean? Right, so they were capturing people who were collecting taxes, and this was just a group of colonists working against all of what Britain was doing, okay? So they worked against tax collectors, you might say that. They were capturing them, working against, if you were coming to collect money for the government, they were not allowing that.
So did they just sail over on their ship once a month?
they just had probably some that were over there all
Wait.
the time.
So they
Okay.
put
And remember, you had those ones, remember we divided loyalists and patriots. Okay, and we'll talk more about that too. You had people over there that were still loyal to the king. Okay, and they probably relied on them. There were probably British soldiers still there from the French and Indian War that didn't go back. So they're there. Okay. Kenny?
Didn't also like back then, didn't sometimes like some tax collectors like they would owe $5, but like they would say you owe $10 and keep the extra money for themselves.
I don't know about then, but yes, at some point there were people that were committing tax fraud, even still today. All right, it says women also took action against the Stamp Act. They formed their own group known as the Daughters of Liberty. Members of the group spun thread and wove their own cloth instead of buying British cloth. The cloth was so popular that women in Providence, Rhode Island, chose a large place in which to make it, the city courthouse. So now we have the Daughters of Liberty. What did they do? Forgot a T. There we go.
Can you put a B?
Yep, there's a B here. Daughters of Liberty. Who are they? What'd they do? Maya? Yeah, they made their own cloth, right? Okay, so they were, why were they doing that? What were they trying to prevent or maybe to help other colonists not do? What did they not want you to do? What were they protesting? Kenny?
That even if we have to pay cloth to, or even if we have to pay tax to buy your stuff, we'll find a way to get around it and make our own stuff.
Right, they were trying to avoid buying the British cloth, the British goods, right? They were protesting that. If you're gonna tax those items, then we're gonna find a way so we can make our own, or not have to use those and purchase those. So that's what they were doing, trying to protest British goods. By 1766, so many colonists opposed the Stamp Act that Parliament voted to repeal or take back the act. The very next day, however, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act. It said that Britain had the full power to make laws for the people of America in all cases. This new law worried many colonists. So they repealed the act. What does that mean? What does it mean that they repealed the act in 1766? What does that mean, Emmy? Yeah, they took it back. Why? Why did they take it back? Because what happened? It's in the PDF. Go back and look. That paragraph there. Why did they take it back? Why did they repeal the Stamp Act? Riker?
Because they still needed more money.
They took it back. They got rid of it.
Oh, they got rid of it?
Yeah, they got rid of the act because, Sean?
Colonists were buying their stuff, so
Right.
it wasn't really worth it.
It said so many colonists opposed it, so they repealed it. Right? The colonists were not making it easy for the British to collect these taxes. So they thought, you know what, we'll take that one away. They got rid of the Stamp Act, and then they did what?
Again.
What'd they tell them? Lots of causes and effects here. They pass the Stamp Act, colonists oppose it, protest it, they take the Stamp Act back, and then Britain tells the American colonists what? What do they tell them, Kenny?
That they were going to start a
Yeah, they passed this declaratory act, which states what? What does it say?
That Britain had full power to make laws for the people of America and all cases.
Right, Britain gets to make laws in America. That's pretty much what it comes down to. It says we can make these laws and you have to follow them. Okay? No matter what. That's what that declaratory act is telling those colonists. You think those colonists are happy about this? No, right? You think they're getting madder? Yes, they are. They're being punished for something they didn't necessarily want. They didn't want that French and Indian War to happen. And now they're being punished. They had to pay for it. They said we shouldn't have to pay for it. Britain says you do. And then the king is getting mad, right? Everybody's getting upset. Everybody's getting angry. So, things continue to kind of spiral out of control.
The king didn't do one thing. What did he do?
I'm on page 305. It says Committee of Correspondence. Yes. Yes, I can. How's that? I'm going to put here Committee of Correspondence, because that's what we're going to read next.
Numeral 2 has a lot.
Yeah, number 2 does. It's a long section here. There we go. I think I got it now.
Is there any more numerals?
Yeah, we got a letter E. We're going to add some more here.
That's a long word.
It is.
Wait, is that all one mark?
It is. No, this is 3. It's one thing.
I
It looked like 3/4 is my thing.
Committees of Correspondence.
That's a big word.
That's what you're writing down. Now let's find out what the Committee of Correspondence is. It says the repeal of the Stamp Act showed that the colonists could work together, but they needed better ways to share information. News traveled slowly because letters were mostly delivered by riders on horseback. It could take many days for people to find out about events in other colonies. To spread information between colonies more quickly, the colonists formed the Committees of Correspondence. Members of these committees wrote letters to one another. In their letters, they told about what was happening in their town and colony. Samuel Adams organized the first Committee of Correspondence in Boston in 1764. Adams had spoken out many times against British imperial policies. These were the laws and orders issued by the king and the British Parliament. The next year, colonists in New York formed another committee. Colonists soon spoke about the need for a committee of correspondence in every colony. Virginia formed a committee in 1773. Members of the Virginia Committee wrote that all colonists should be much disturbed by various rumors and reports of proceedings tending to deprive them of their rights. Committee members then asked other colonies to start their own committees of correspondence. Committee members in each colony wrote letters to other cities and towns. They asked people in the other colonies to protest or work against British policies. What is the purpose of the committees of correspondence? So there's more than one, right? Each colony has this committee. What does it do? What is it supposed to do? One person? Maybe we should reread that. I'm going to reread those paragraphs there. What does the committees of correspondence do? Claire? It's supposed to help them work together. Help them work together doing what? Part of it, they want to protest, right? So they're going to work together to do these protests. The committees of correspondence. So if I'm corresponding to somebody, it means I'm having a conversation, right? I'm talking to them. What was the point of these groups? Kenny?
People protesting against the Declaratory Act.
No, it wasn't them They are, in general, they are protesting all of these. I don't wanna say they're not, but that wasn't necessarily the purpose of this committee. Maya? Was spreading information faster, right? All of the colonies needed these so they could work together and get information from one colony to the other. Okay, spread information quickly. And each colony had created one eventually. Okay. You can put info, yep. So that was the point of these committees of correspondence. All right, so Roman numeral 3 is gonna be the Townsend Acts, and we'll read this one tomorrow. Okay, we'll read the Townsend Acts, and then we'll have the Boston Massacre. We'll finish up lesson 2 tomorrow. All right, and things continue to spiral. So we've already seen that the British Parliament, the government, keeps taxing and adding new taxes and adding new laws for the colonists. So the Townsend Act is no different. Okay, and we'll get to that one tomorrow. Today, for social studies, you need to go back to page 302. Okay, there are several vocab words, people, and places here that you need to add to that spot that you should have left blank. If you run out of room and you didn't have enough, you can always add it somewhere, okay, on the next page or something, on the back, however you want to do it. Remember, you need to find these people in this lesson, okay? Because we're going to see some of these people again, like Benjamin Franklin. He comes up again several times between now and the end of the Revolution. Same thing with Paul Revere. I believe we see him again. Samuel Adams. Those are people we continue to see. So you need to see what they did in this lesson that contributed to the colonists' efforts. Okay? Just like I told you for lesson 1, George Washington was on there, right? But he wasn't the president then. He did other things before becoming our first president. Okay? So your assignment for social studies today is the chapter 8, lesson 2, vocab, people, and places. And we'll finish reading lesson 2 tomorrow. Question, Maya? What is that? Oh, so yeah, if you want to add, I think we can do, you can do the Stamp Act and Sons of Liberty on this causes of the Revolutionary War. So on this paper, right, you've got Stamp Act and Sons of Liberty. You can add those 2 in. Okay, and then we'll get to the other ones tomorrow. Where are you? Oh, page 305. Oh, yep. It's like they're kind of like our signs on the highway, right? They had used stones to show you which way to go back then. Question, John? What page are you on? 305. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you could write that down for Boston and Samuel Adams. That's kind of the importance of him, right? He created the first committee of correspondence in Boston. That's why Boston's listed. Boston's in there again as well, so you might need to add some more information for Boston. Okay? Riker. All right. Chapter 8, lesson 2, vocab, people, places.